the slogan of shaping our digital future. The Arab International Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, DCDF, will bring together representatives and experts from Arab governments, the business sector, civil society, the technical community, academia, and international organizations. DCDF will be held virtually from 13 to 23 December 2021 by ESCO, LAS, ITU, UNCTAD, and UNDESA. Through almost 30 sessions over 8 days, you can participate in policy debate on priority issues in the fields of internet policies and digital development globally and in the Arab region. DCDF aims to align the Arab tracks of the World Summit on the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forum to maximize opportunities for digital cooperation. Register now to join us in this journey from 13 to 23 December. Together, let's shape our digital future.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome on board to this very interesting and important session. My name is Nermeen Al-Saadani. I'm the Regional Vice President of the Arab Office at the Internet Society. Today, we will be tackling a very important and interesting question or topic that I would believe is very, very important to our region in specific and even across the globe: connectivity and having access to the internet. So the Internet Society has always been there as one of the a main arm of the technical community, and we do believe that the internet has to remain open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy. We have set our goals for 2025 to build, defend, and promote the internet. And we had this objectives during the previous year, and we will continue to build on those objectives in the coming year to continue collaboration with policymakers and our community to build new partnership and to enhance the presence of the regional technical community and build the calibers and raise the capacity buildings of our young generation as well. I think we will all agree that if it weren't for the internet, we wouldn't be able to do half the things that we are doing today. Reliable internet connection is essential to get everyone to have an easy life and to be able to be more productive, to better be included in the global community, maintain even your health, financial transactions, and schooling even online. How can we survive without the internet? Half the world population right now is still underserved or unserved. So we are not even speaking about stable internet or reliable internet. We speak about non-existing internet in some places, and this will even increase, the digital divide, not between the nations or the countries, but even among the country itself, when the rural area will be unserved and the urban areas will be served, and the divide will cause many struggles and many strikes even within a country. So today we will be tackling innovative ways to foster connectivity in a reliable manner, and then we will indulge with a special focus on a good model that we believe and we introduced to the global community for as an alternate way for connectivity, which we call community network. I believe that and this is a very, very interesting topic, and I believe that this 2 sessions that we are having today, so we have this session in the morning, and then we will continue the discussion in another session in the afternoon. We will be shedding the light on the concept of connectivity and community network in specific, tackling the challenges, the opportunities that we can have out of it. And we will be introducing some practical examples from the region and from outside the region as well, so that we can encourage more to join the efforts that we are doing. On behalf of the Internet Society, I would like to welcome you all. thank our partners, and in specific, the ASWA, the League of Arab States, and the ITU Regional Office for the Arab region. And without further ado, I would like to welcome my friend and my colleague, Mr. Ayman Al-Sherbini from the ASWA, to introduce his keynote remarks. Ayman?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nermeen. It's been a while since we met virtually or physically. So I'm very happy to meet you. And I'm also happy because of that session and specifically for many reasons. First of all, you as partner to us has been having a close partnership for a very long time in institutional capacity as ISOC, and you personally, Nermeen, in different capacities that you have taken in the last years. So from an institutional capacity context, ISOC has been, and that is even before I joined the UN, has been a very important actor in the world of internet. I remember our first chapter in Egypt in the 90s. I remember how we mobilized the people to believe in that transition. Who can believe that it is 24 years now or 23 years ago? I remember these meetings in the cabinet and many other things when the ministry and the government at that time were trying to instigate that new transition. And in the last decade, when we worked together from ESCWA ISOC perspective, we had very close cooperation as we both believe in the value of the internet to sustainable development, the value of the internet to leaving no one behind, and the value of the internet into making people really part of the future. And that is why this important activity of today that comes within the DCDF, or the Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, where we want really to shape our digital future. And in shaping that digital future in the MENA region, in the Arab region, in the developing world, no one better than ISOC can really work on bringing the grassroots and bringing those unconnected to be connected through their different roles and activities. That's why I'm happy at the institutional level, as well as I said, on the personal level, working with Nermeen. Now comes to the topic. The topic comes very timely when, as Nermeen said, half of the world is still unconnected, and we are talking about a present that is digital, let alone the future. Second, today specifically is the day we dedicated for the first Arab IGF plenary session on meaningful access. So this workshops comes very well situated into that program with your two sessions in the morning and in the afternoon, and with the plenary in the middle. We all are really contributing to meaningful access. But here it is more even radical. We are contributing to access to start with. How come we see people not connected in that era? How come we see people even connected in a very mediocre manner in terms of speed, or in terms of sustainability, or even affordability? So it has been and will always be a very high priority issue, the access, the meaningful access, and the community access. So I'm myself looking forward to that very interesting discussion, to the case studies that will come from Yemen, from Morocco, from other parts of the world. And I'm looking also to really learn more on how can we work together after the two sessions more into that noble cause. And I'm wishing you all the best. Without further ado, I give the floor to Mr. Michael. Mr. Michael is Kendi, is the moderator of this session. He's a senior advisor at Analysis Nason, digital development specialist at IFC, and looking forward to successful moderation and dialogue. Michael, the floor is yours. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thanks for the invitation to present on this key topic of how to increase access and then hopefully make it meaningful to reach under and unserved populations. and in particular looking at community networks and other ways to deliver access from the bottom up, I think is going to be a key part of this session. At this point, to kick us off, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Walid. You have access to his full bio, which is very impressive and has a lot of points. I'll just highlight some of the key parts. He has a PhD in optics and photonics and lasers, worked for Intel on the first Raman silicon laser, then moved to AT&T Labs, working on, among other things, 3G, 4G, and LTE service quality. Then to Google as the network architect to provide broadband connectivity in emerging markets, looking also at network transport and data center design. And he has now joined the ITU as the head of Future Network and Spectrum Management Division. And he will be talking to us on shedding light on examples for popular innovative connectivity models. Walid?
Thank you, Michael, for the nice intro. Thank you, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here among you discussing this very important topic for the region, but also globally. I'd like to share one slide that I'm going to be talking through. I hope you guys are seeing the slide, but I will be talking through it. So before talking about like this innovative solutions, I'd like, first of all, it's no secret to no one that ICT infrastructure today is a cornerstone of economical growth and sustainable development. And not only that, it is also a critical lever for social inclusion, social and financial inclusion, both in rural and urban areas. So it's very important to have a sound, reliable infrastructure. Now, before even thinking about like solutions, how we can get there, get to the point where we had affordable and reliable access everywhere, let's look at the state of things. Let's look at the state of the art. And if we do take a look quickly, it's actually a grim picture so far. Today, we have globally, I think, around 2 billion people without reliable access to good connectivity. And the problem is multivariate. It spans to multiple areas. But here in this slide, I tried to capture like six main points where the situation needs improvement. So the first point on the top left of the slide, you can see there is a coverage gap. By a coverage gap, based on the statistical report from the ITU, the recent one that has been published like a couple of weeks ago, we have today 15 to 25% of the population without access to any mobile broadband in the least developing countries, the landlocked developing countries, and the small island developing states. And in general, like 4G connectivity in LDCs and LLDCs is twice less likely than in other states. So to give the exact numbers there, it's 42% in LDCs and LLDCs who have 4G coverage compared to an average global of like 84% global level. So beyond the coverage challenges, we also have a problem of usage gap, which is even more exacerbated than the coverage one. There are actually 3.4 billion people that have coverage but are not able to use it in the way we think it is. We could use it today in developing countries, and the reason for that could be affordability, or also like the lack of knowledge, the lack of digital knowledge, how to search on the internet, how to use the internet services. A big chunk of the global population is not able to use the internet in a proper way to make sense out of it. And a segue to that, like that gap is even more important when we look at the data between urban and rural. There's a clear urban versus rural divide, and it's particularly a big divide in developing countries. So in LDCs and LLDCs, the rural population is 37% less likely to use mobile internet. I think in certain countries, landlocked countries, that number is 1/4, 25% of the urban population is less likely to connect to the internet compared to urban dwellers. The next point is, of course, affordability. In most of these countries, the developing countries, and particularly in our region as well, in some areas, like the price of the data and voice could reach up to 10% of the GNI of the income, and that's a crying far out number from the SDG goal of 2030, where the target is like around 2%. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on affordability. The last piece that I really identified that is closest to my background and closest to my heart is like the actual infrastructure, the backbone fiber in most of the developing countries. There's very little backbone fiber in between cities, let alone in second tier and third tier cities where there's complete absence of backbone or ring fiber to cover the city. We're not even going towards like fiber to the home, where it's very far from reality today. So there needs to be a way to rethink how we can build the infrastructure and how we can build fiber and densify networks in second tier and third tier cities. Now, because of all these challenges, and I just captured 6 of them here, and there are so many other ones that we need to tackle. This is a clear message for us that we need to really come up with innovative solutions. We need to drastically change the way we think about building infrastructure and providing digital services to our populations in order to be able to bridge the gap for the remaining part of the connectivity, because that's the hardest part that needs to be connected. So in terms of like innovative solution and innovative way of thinking, I tried to come up with like maybe 4 points. These are just indications based on my own experience, but they remain like open to discussion. So the first point is transparency about the current status. And at ITU, we're working very hardly to build a platform to display and show the existing infrastructure in several countries. So being open and transparent about what already exists in countries in terms of fiber, cable, in terms of coverage, and displaying that in a national map so everyone could look at the status and could assess and run gap analysis and see where the opportunities are to fill up the gap. So transparency is one big new way of thinking about these things. The second point is to come up with smarter regulations to promote more competition, to bring the prices down. And that's the smarter regulations could include a broadband roadmap, a comprehensive roadmap till 2030 about like thinking about like hosting regulations, data laws, a comprehensive roadmap for connectivity, but not only connectivity, but also like hosting services and internet usage in general. And that needs to be clear, set up by governmental regulation institutions to be able to attract investments. Other innovative smarter regulations could be pushing towards sharing the existing infrastructure, opening up infrastructure, coming up with ways to open up more spectrum, like for example, multi-tier spectrum licensing, For example, there's an example of that in the United States, where there's the CBRS, a 3.5 gigahertz band, where the licensing is 3 tiers. So you have a general licensing, you have a paid license, and you have a community licensing. So if the priority licensee is not using the spectrum in the region, a community could use that same spectrum under a 2nd tier or 3rd tier license. So that will help build in more infrastructure in less dense and rural areas. And in general, like pushing towards RAN sharing and infrastructure sharing. The third point is about trying to be innovative and in the way of thinking and unlocking technical solutions. And I'm gonna highlight a couple of those. For example, push towards a very light licensing of unused bands like millimeter wave in the 80 gigahertz and the 90 gigahertz. These are very high band frequencies that are not usually non-used today. Let operators or non-conventional players be able to tap into those frequencies to provide like backbone and point-to-point backhaul connectivity to the remote areas or to the rural areas. That could be one technical solution. There are other bands in the spectrum, like the 450 megahertz in certain countries that are very good non-used spectrum that could help connect and replace the conventional, very expensive microwave point-to-point connectivity. Another technical solution that could be considered is wholesale licensing for fiber. So instead of like having every operator in the country or in a region build like its own fiber, have one operator and own that wholesale infrastructure and sell fiber to the retailers, and that will help reduce the entry price for using the infrastructure to provide services, and aggregate actually the fiber build out in 2nd tier and 3rd tier cities. Of course, the third one that I'm thinking of, like in terms of like technical aspects for the last mile connectivity, is to push towards public Wi-Fi and more public Wi-Fi, opening up like the next generations of Wi-Fi and empower communities to use public Wi-Fi in public areas and public community areas to bring in more and more people to use like good Wi-Fi connectivity, and by doing so, like trying to help him have access to access points to Wi-Fi routers and switches. The last technical solution that I really highly recommend to consider, which is really like now changing very fastly, is satellite broadband connectivity, particularly in less dense areas or rural areas. It's a very good alternative today. It's becoming very competitive in terms of like performance. So we have like operators like Starlink in the US, Intelsat, Spacecom. The price points are getting low, but the hurdles to adopt such solutions to connect very far locations is still very complicated. So thinking about like putting together end-to-end technical solution using broadband satellite connectivity as a backbone and as eventually a competitor to fiber connectivity needs to be seriously considered. Last but not least is thinking about innovative business cases to bring in capital and investment for building the missing infrastructure. And I'm going to mention like 2 points here. The first point is to try to think about rethink the way we generate revenue from infrastructure, for example, by attracting ad-based subsidized connectivity. For example, in the same way you watch a YouTube video, you have to trade some of your attention to watch an ad, and that will pay for the infrastructure for you to watch the video. We can think about something similar for connectivity, where you have to watch an ad and trade your attention for a certain time to be able to connect to a Wi-Fi router for free or for like a very little fee. So we need to try to rethink about like new sources of revenue to subsidize the infrastructure build out. The last thing, the second point there for innovative business case is to try to think about ways to attract non-conventional telco players. And by that, I mean hyperscalers like the Googlers, the Amazons, the content delivery networks like the Netflix. Try to connect them, try to bring them in the space so they can subsidize the infrastructure, or they can toss in or put together kind of like a trade-in connectivity market. Let's say, for example, a hyperscaler have a lot of capacity, fiber capacity in subsea between two continents, but would like to access some capacity and some fiber capacity in a city in the region. We should be thinking about ways how to allow that exchange to happen without having the hyperscalers or the operators trying to build their own infrastructure. So that's kind of like in a nutshell here, some thoughts about like how we can think about bridging the gap for connectivity and connecting the remaining 2 billion. It is a very pressing issue, particularly in our region. The millennials cannot imagine a world without reliable and good connectivity for their life. It's very different from when I grew up, but I hope we can solve this challenge together. Over back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Walid. I think you've given us a lot to think about there. I think that we have these two gaps, as you mentioned, coverage gap and usage gap. Solving the usage gap, I think, will help all of us. More affordable access, more content, all the things that will help increase demand will help bring people online. Today, we're going to focus more on the coverage gap, and you've given us a number of ideas for how to lower the cost of deploying new technologies to use, which will help both commercial operators afford to go into areas that may have not been viable to date. And also a lot of the solutions will help complementary access solutions such as community networks that we're going to be talking about during the panel. So let me go ahead and introduce the panel. We have three panelists. The first, Juan Perano, the Senior Policy Advisor for the Internet Society, focused on internet infrastructure and access, working on internet growth, access, and sustainability. And prior to joining ISOC, worked as a policy officer for LACNIC and worked in engineering at Telefonica. The second panelist, Marwa Azelmat, is a women's rights policy advocacy coordinator at APC, and had throughout her career has been working on rethinking social justice in a digital age, wherein institutional development needs to unleash gender technology for effective policy measures and accountability practices. Marwa holds a Master's of Laws and LLM in International Human Rights Law and Democratization and an IT engineering degree. And finally, Sharaf Azain is an entrepreneur and founder of a leading tech consulting and training firm in Yemen, helping telecom companies and local ISPs unlock new business value through tech. He's a founding member of the Information Technology Companies Committee at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Yemen. And last but not least, the president of the Internet Society Yemen chapter. So hello, welcome, and thank you for joining. Just a quick introduction. Community networks, our topic today is going to be on focusing on enabling environment and status in the region for developing complementary access solutions, including these community networks. These networks really require enabling regulation to be started. That can include having a license, access to spectrum and backhaul with all the new and innovative technologies that we just heard about. Backhaul will have to come from a telecom operator, so transparency, more access to fiber will be better. And hopefully the telecom operators view these new networks as complementary, not competitors, and help them by providing access to the backhaul. And finally, at the community level, it requires capacity building, it requires demand, it requires involvement of the community to develop and use and socialize the network. So a lot of topics to discuss. First, I thought we would just maybe open by with some opening thoughts about community networks from each panelist, and maybe a few reflections on what we just heard in our keynote address. Juan, can we start with you, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Michael, for the introduction. And I would like to also thank the panelists, Marwa and Sharaf here. This is a great panel, and hopefully we'll have a great discussion about this topic. I think initially what we and Walid set the table very well, especially with the numbers about connectivity and this divide between urban and rural, and how hard we need to work still to connect the people that are the hardest to connect. And if you look at also the ITU facts and figures that Walid was referring to, we can see that we are at this point in the connectivity landscape, we are connecting more people each year, but the trend is slowing down. So what this means is that we started the century connecting people exponentially because we were connecting the people that were the easiest to connect, and in urban areas, in peri-urban areas, in places where the business models, the traditional business models of telecommunications made sense. But now what we are seeing at this stage in the connectivity evolution is that we are slowing down. We are connecting more people, but in a slower way. And this is exactly because we are not reaching out to the hardest to connect people. And this is where we at the Internet Society believe that community networks at the bottom-up infrastructure creation is a key complementary way, as you very well said, Michael, to connect the unconnected. And this is because we have all the traditional business telecommunications models that work excellent in where you have big demographics, you have people in urban areas or people that are very much together. But what happens in rural areas or in very hard places to connect in the mountains or in the jungles? I come from Latin America, so my knowledge about the Amazon is right up there with what we need to do to connect people in those places. So I believe, not I, but the Internet Society believe that community networks as a infrastructure solution will definitely help and complement all the efforts of traditional business models. And again, complement because traditional business models and telecommunications companies and mobile companies and broadband companies play a key role to connect those places in terms of allowing them to use spectrum, as you said, shared spectrum, creating connections to the backhaul, helping with business development skills and capacity building in those areas. So again, I will let my fellow colleagues speak, but that's what I wanted to say regarding the complementary aspect of community networks. Thank you.
Great. Marwa, would you have a few opening comments, please?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone, and thanks, Michael, for this very timely question. Thanks for having me as well. I think for me, I'll go beyond numbers and technicalities, because at the end of the day, if we're speaking that and if we're saying that we're connecting more people, we should also say that we're less of them are women, of course. Less of them are women in rural areas or people in rural areas. And we're also talking about the fact that we're not meaningfully connecting people and sometimes straining them with solutions that don't really speak to their needs, to their cultural context, to this kind of enabling environment, because we're not just talking about numbers, how many people we want to get connected, just to say that we're connecting the word per se. So for me today, I really want to speak to community networks as infrastructure of resistance, because we're not just creating or just enabling people to get connected, but we're also enabling them to lead that change. And when they lead that change, it goes a long way. And that's what we experience in different places, because once you get to or get the hang of meaningful connectivity by really understanding how people, they police themselves because of connectivity, they police themselves because of how straining financially, culturally, socially, economically speaking, some solutions don't work for them and don't work for their context, they actually drop out of the system. So we're trying to hack that system and to subvert everything that's not working for them, especially if we're talking in a context of Global South, where the Global South is consuming the technology of the Global North. So I think community networks is a really nice solution to lead that change and make sure that we're not just consumers of connection. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And Sharaf, would you have a few opening remarks that you'd like to share with us, please? Not seeing him online. Sharaf, are you there? Okay, Juan, maybe I could ask you to maybe spend a few minutes just making sure everyone understands kind of the definition of a community network, what it is, why it's an important element of the coverage gap, and maybe some of the experiences of the Internet Society in other countries in setting up a community network. Hopefully Sharaf can join us again and talk about his experiences in Yemen, but maybe you can set the stage with a little broader definition.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question. It's very important to understand that community network itself is not one solution. It's a set of solutions and what we understand as community networks could mean different aspects in the different regions, as Marwa very helpfully say about the difference between North and South and even in the different continents. But in a nutshell, community networks are network infrastructure built for, by, and with the people that are using it. What this means is that the people or the users or the clients or the subscribers at the end of the day of the network and the infrastructure they are using are also maintaining it, are also generating, being part of the governance of that network. And I think the easiest, most relatable way to understand what a community network is, it's like a cooperative of any other business, or for electricity, for example, or for water. The members of that cooperative have ownership over that infrastructure, and they have a say, and they have a way of building it in the best way that they believe is best for their own local interests. I started by saying that this comes in different shapes and sizes, so to speak, because our experience at the Internet Society is that we have seen community networks that grow to achieve 200,000 subscribers, such as Wi-Fi in Spain, and others that just serve, for example, 300 people or a set of 100 families in the rural areas of Argentina. And both of the solutions are following the ethos of what a community network is, basically people from the local community building the infrastructure for themselves and making sure that it serves their needs in terms of affordability, in terms of capacity, in terms of sustainability at the end of the day. And And I see, I think Sharaf is back on, so I'll let Sharaf talk a little bit about his experience as well.
Okay, thank you, Juan. Before I ask Sharaf to talk about his experiences in Yemen, I just want to point out to everyone else that if you'd like to drop questions into the Q&A, we will answer them either in chat or we'll have time at the end to answer your questions. So please go ahead and use that feature. And I see that Walid has already answered one of the questions. Thank you for that in the chat. Sharaf, can you share some of your experiences now in setting up a community network in Yemen, please?
Thank you all for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be a panelist with the dear colleagues. Let me first give you a background about the situation here in Yemen. It is unsettled since 2011, and we have been suffering from the internet connection and telecom as an overall. 7 years ago, we've been in a very aggressive
This is an incarnation of the connectivity problem.
Sorry, you cut off at 7 years ago. There was a slight pause. If you could just go back a little bit. You said 7 years ago, and then there was a pause.
Thinking if we shall turn off the video while he's speaking, maybe that would help his bandwidth.
Sure. Okay, go ahead, Sharaf. Sharaf, we're not hearing you.
excuse me, I got disconnected and I had to rejoin from mobile. I don't know where I got disconnected, but here in Yemen, we are suffering from the service provided by the government. And at the same time, the war here has make us really suffer because they are bombing the telecom infrastructure and we suffer from the fuel. And you cannot imagine what people here suffer from internet connection. There is a blockade on Yemen. The only window for people to communicate, to work, is internet. A lot of use and capacity has been increased because of the war. And the problem is that we have two governments here in Yemen, and they are fighting over the capacity international lines that comes to Yemen. At the end of 2020, the internet connection has been lost because of the main international line incident happened in the Suez Canal. And you cannot imagine that we've been working only like 1 hour, 2 hours a day. In Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, many local community networks has been developed by the communities here. But they are providing this service with money and unreliable and unsecure services. This is just a small background about what's the current situation.
Okay. Thank you. Would you mind spending a few minutes talking about the community network that you've and what you've been doing in Yemen?
Yes, sure. The community network that we are developing, it was mainly we were trying to make it in Sana'a, but you cannot imagine the regulations and the authorities how they enforce the regulations here. So we had to look all over Yemen. What is the best community that can help us as authorities and as a community? And after a long research, we have found that Al-Mukalla is the best place because they are a bit far from the conflict. So we looked for a local partner there, an NGO with the permit to operate. And it was a very, very exciting project to implement. And the stakeholders there were very cooperative. They were very happy to implement such a project. And it could be an example for future projects.
Great. Well, thank you for that. You said a few times you cannot imagine, and speaking for myself, you're right. It's very, very hard to imagine the challenges that you're facing and the work that you've been able to do so far. So thank you for helping shed a little light on that. Impressive work. Quick question for Marwa. One of the issues in many of the countries that have coverage gaps, in many countries in general, is the gender gap. And I wonder if you could touch a little bit on the challenges in terms of gender inclusion in general, and also specific to these types of projects and access solutions that we've been talking about here.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Sarah, for sharing your insights, and sorry to hear about your struggles and the struggles of the people of Yemen. So I think for me, just to set the tone in terms of how I personally see things through a gender lens, and why is it really essential to highlight within this specific context. So just to understand really the significance of community networks as a solution within these courses of connectivity, it is important to first understand that existing digital infrastructure operates in a broadly and sustainable manner. So we're talking about sustainability, and again, what does meaningful connectivity stand for in different contexts? So data use, generation, and computation are growing at an exponential rate in the absence of substantial strategies towards sustainable design, human-centered design, of course, with a gender lens. And when I say really gender lens, I understand that it can be really contentious for different people, but really what we mean is the power dynamics that play thereof in terms of how women relate to connectivity versus how men relate to connectivity. So additionally, existing business models fail to provide last mile connectivity, and digital infrastructure is not really profitable in remote and rural regions where employment, income, education are lower than in urban regions. So they're really rendering the demand flexible and low. So going back, how really we see that community networks really build that enabling environment, but also that kind of infrastructure of resistance for women, rural dwellers, and marginalized communities, who make up the majority of those without digital connectivity due to systemic barriers, including affordability, access to digital skills, education, language literacy, but also entrenched relevance and social norms. So we need when intended to be inclusive, the design and development of or deployment of technology are often underpinned by concepts and frameworks that are not really applicable to the lived realities of marginalized groups and structurally marginalized groups or infrastructurally marginalized groups. So such technologies, they really increasingly shape political, economic, and social cultural systems that mediate access to the public sphere. So I think there is no better way to do that than to design tech infrastructures that are really taken into account the local knowledge and the community governance, but also that they call for decolonizing decolonizing technology, which require a resistance to hierarchical systems, infrastructures, and methods, as well as centering the histories and implications for women and communities, including marginalized groups. So, and perhaps we could just give like the economic lens, which is enough to address the question of, or not enough to address, but enough to make the case for why is it essential to really invest in those kind of solutions, especially in remote places, conflict-stricken countries, and just environments that are really hostile towards marginalized groups. And so they just call for a kind of in-depth engagement with underlying and structural inequalities, but also for a kind of concerted and collective efforts between different stakeholders that center around the leadership, really the promotion and the inclusion of women who become leaders of these solutions. And so this context really creates a context of empowerment through technologies and digital equality at large that cannot be divorced from offline experiences and social political realities. Yeah, back to you, Michael.
Great, thanks. Do you have any examples of where this has been done successfully, or the approach that might be taken that have worked that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I do have examples, but unfortunately, I'll be speaking from anecdotal evidence because the data is still scarce. Speaking of the Arab region, we have, we have data available for instance, for Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. But overall, well, I can say for instance, from Morocco, where I come from, and from what I've seen in rural places and the solutions that have been implemented in, for instance, the Atlas Mountains, where indigenous communities live, it's really create, again, that enabling environment where people would trust each other, but also it creates that environment where less financial strain is put on solutions that would not really work there. So for instance, if we talk of 4G or just mobile broadband connectivity, and we know that it's known to restrict the type and numbers of applications that users can use over the internet. So seeing that kind of comparative policies which focus only on providing mobile phones to people there versus really giving them the opportunity to become a service providers really goes a long way. And we've been witnessing that firsthand. But of course, if anyone would like to know more, we can, or I can speak to that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'll ask, we definitely want to get to a Q&A. I can see a few people that would like to ask questions in the chat. Just wanted to maybe step back and ask the three of you about some of the enabling environment aspects. In particular, what regulations in your experience have been important for helping to promote these community networks? We heard Sharaf talk a little bit about that the NGO that they used to set up the community network already had a license to operate, which is key in many countries, maybe the key issue for getting access to spectrum and other aspects. But just wanted to open up a little bit on the regulatory aspects of setting it up. Juan, maybe you could talk a little from your experience.
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, I would like to commend also the work that APC is doing with AFCICs in the region, and Morocco, Marwa, they are doing great job there. So and AFCICs is an organization led by women. So I think it's a key. At least from the perspective of ISOC, we are very happy when we work with them. In terms of enabling policy environments, from the Internet Society and in general, I think, and it's something that you already mentioned. It's shared among partners that we work in this aspects. It's threefold, and I would like to add something that Walid said about mapping. But the three main areas would be, as you said, licensing, spectrum management, and allocation, and then financing mechanisms. And very quickly, I think licensing, as you said, is I think the key to unlock the other two aspects of regulation. But because regulation works in a holistic view, I think we need to take this as a package. And by that I mean that we need to be able to develop regulation and policy that enables other forms, and in this case complementary forms of infrastructure development. In our case, we support community networks. So what we need is to see more licenses given to organizations and groups of people that want to create a community network. And I think Sharaf example is exactly that. I think the community that Sharaf participates in, they build the NGO, because community networks in many cases are organizations without profits, or non-profit organizations. So creating that an environment which allows for non-traditional operators to get a license in a way that is affordable, first of all, easy to understand, and easy to access. Because again, we mentioned at the beginning of this discussion that the people that we are trying to connect right now are the hardest to connect. So and that also means that they have in many cases lower resources, lower skills. So we cannot expect these communities to pay for a big shot lawyer or expensive lawyer to get a license in the capital city. It's very important to create processes that are streamlined, easy to access, straightforward, and affordable specifically for this situations where we want to connect people in hard to reach places. And there are examples in Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, Zimbabwe. So it's something that is already happening. It's not a theoretical issue that we are dealing with. Regulators are already applying these solutions for community networks. And very quickly, spectrum allocation, of course, we need to promote use and share spectrum frameworks, dynamic spectrum allocations, the promotion of TV white spaces, more unlicensed spectrum as much as possible. And I think the region made a great job with the 6 gigahertz band for Wi-Fi 6. In many countries, we are seeing the whole band being allocated for Wi-Fi, which is it's great, because unlicensed spectrum is a spectrum that Wi-Fi uses, and we already know that many of the traffic that happens in the mobile networks, it's offloaded to the Wi-Fi network. So I think this is a great achievement. And finally, financing mechanisms. We need to use universal service funds most likely in the short term to promote and to enable this complementary access solutions. And I will leave it there because I don't know how much time we have left. Thank you, Michael.
Great. Yeah, we're coming up on the questions. But Sharaf, if you can maybe just share a little bit about your experiences Juan mentioned three things: licensing, which you talked about a little bit, access to spectrum, and financing. Could you talk a little bit about the experience of financing a network, given all the challenges that that you faced, and if you are using unlicensed or licensed spectrum, and if licensed, how you were able to get access?
Thank you very much. Actually, we are using unlicensed spectrum for this current project. The local authorities there did not mind at first, and we are using repeaters and.
Can you speak a little closer to the microphone, please? We're having trouble hearing.
Okay. As I told you, we are using unlicensed spectrum for this project. It is our first project there, and the local authority there did not mind because we have a very good local NGO there, and they have facilitate all the troubles there. And we use mainly repeaters and Wi-Fi expanders to cover the area, which is not new in Yemen. We use it all over Yemen. And the problem there is we use only this model. It is not allowed to use any spectrum due to security issues here because of the war. So we have reached out to the Ministry of Telecom, and we talked to them that we can work on a project-based. They are still considering our proposal. It's been like 1 year. We did not have any clearance about this proposal, but maybe in the coming days, as we have a successful project, this will help us present a good example, and all what they fear will be vanished.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for elaborating and providing that real practical experience. Marwa, from your perspective, are there any policy changes that would help, or I'm sure there are, but if you would like to highlight one that would help with the issues that you raised, both in general for addressing the gender inclusion issues, but also specifically to these new community networks?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an important question, but really before highlighting any policy change, and of course there are so many, I think we need to understand the issue, because if we can't understand it, we can't measure it and we can't change it. And right now, I can see that we don't really have a kind of disaggregated data that really looks into different spans of life or kind of lifespan of these connectivity, and how does it really affect different communities in different places. So I think to begin with, we need to really invest in research when it comes to how this affects people of different communities, but also people with different layers of vulnerability, because we're not just talking about one homogeneous group that is getting a kind of one-size-fits-all solution. So that's to begin with, before really properly looking into any policy change, so that we can inform these decisions. And then if we speak about, of course, the realm of change, and we have a lot of areas to tap onto, because it's not just about the technicalities again, but also we need to have really people that really work with awareness. I lost the word. Yeah, they're really aware of what they do, and so we need to increase, of course, digital literacy, but also make sure that they are that they have consent to do that, because consent and being informed and having the right access to information goes a long way and help to shape a better, meaningful solution for everyone that is affected within that environment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now we have about 10 minutes for questions, and then I'll ask all the panelists and Waleed, who is in San Francisco and has stayed up very late for this, and would like to give him the final word. Thank him for that. But let's take a couple questions. I see that if it's possible, Yusuf from Chad, I think wants to ask a question. If we can turn on the audio, that would be great. Is that possible? Otherwise, Yusuf, if you put your question in chat. There's another question from Hannah in the Q&A. How can the fact that communities own the network help in increasing use? Does that sense of ownership make any difference? I'm going to guess that the answer is yes, but it would be good to hear how, because I think that's very important in trying to stimulate the communities to develop their own network and prepare for the increase in use. Does anybody want to tackle that one?
Maybe,
No, go ahead.
thank you. Yeah, you said it very well, Michael. The answer is yes. But I think it's as in any other human activity, when you are the person building the infrastructure, or in this case the connectivity that will provide you with access to information, access to school, to health, you create I don't want to get too philosophical, but it's how it is. You create a bond with the network, and you want to maintain that that infrastructure because it's your own. You build it, you maintain it, it helps your community, your neighbors, your family, and that bond that we are creating between men and machines, so to speak, in the sense that we are building the infrastructure, is very strong. And that's why, at least from the Internet Society, we see where the most successful cases of community networks are the ones that have a strong community behind them. Not only a local champion and a person that comes with the idea, but also a strong community that is dedicated, and that they see the benefits of being connected to the internet, and because they know that they will help their community thrive. And I think especially now it's very important for young people to stay in their local communities, especially with remote school and remote learning. I think it's the key issue.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? There's a couple more questions in chat.
I can jump on also, or jump in. So yeah, I think for me, it's just the fact that when policy fails, our community sustain us, really. So, and I think the fact that especially for community networks, when we move beyond the narratives of last mile connectivity, and we rather engage with the specifics of the political economy, institutionalized power, culture, and micropolitics and inequalities, we really move towards more convivial, peaceful, and plural societies. And of course, just like Juan said, we create that kind of bond, which is true. And I think, again, if we move beyond the technicalities of it and see more kind of the behavior that people embodies when they create their own community, it makes a huge difference in how they interact with each other, trust each other, and sustain these solutions. Yeah.
Great. Actually, I see a question from David to Marwa. David, would you like to ask the question? Otherwise, I can read it off. Okay, in the interest of time, dear Marwa, thank you for the presentation. What has been put in place to support women improve connectivity in the Arab region?
Michael, I can speak.
Oh, please, go ahead. Sorry.
what has been put in place. I wanted to thank Malwa for the presentation that focuses on gender and how it is being considered in connectivity. I needed to ask whether there are any policy suggestions or policy interventions that governments have made in the region to assist women and girls improve connectivity. If there are any suggestions or some policies that governments have done to improve this, since you suggested that there is low connectivity in gender. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just answer in a nutshell because there's a lot of things to say when it comes to how we can improve connectivity really from a holistic perspective. But I think there are really two main big leads. The first one is the incentives or the governmental incentives that go into digital literacy, increase digital literacy, especially among women and girls. And we've seen this during the pandemic, but also before, but it has been more increasing during the pandemic. And of course, the second thing is protection, or really to say safety, because again, the relationship that women have with connectivity is not the same that men have. And there is a kind of sense of kind of fear, and but also because technology doesn't necessarily work for them, but also put some women in yeah, or threatens their overall participation in broader spheres of public life. And so if we can look into how we can create a safer space and how we can enable that in different contexts, of course, that would be a good step to start with. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. I'm conscious of time, and as a good Swiss living in Switzerland, we have 3 minutes. Just want to point out, if I can ask everyone to say a few final words. One of the things that could be said in the final point is why these networks are not common in the Arab world. It's an excellent question. And then there is a question about why is the Internet Society interested, and if someone could drop a link, also the APC link of what's been done in community networks, that I think would be very helpful. So Juan, if you could give a few final remarks, please.
Yes, I think I will let also my colleagues from the region to say why it's not a widespread solution. I think we are getting to a position where we are trying to break that traditional ways of seeing telecommunications infrastructure, because it's what we need to do to connect the people that are unconnected at this point. We cannot keep doing what we are doing so far. So, but we need to create that momentum still. And the Arab region, I think it's getting there, but what we still need to work a little bit more. And at the Internet Society, we believe that the internet is for everyone, so that's why we are trying to extend the infrastructure as much as possible. And we see community networks as one of the most valuable complementary access solutions to achieve universal connectivity and achieve the SDGs in 2030. So I will gladly share some links now and pass the mic back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Juan. Marwa?
Yeah, so in 30 seconds, just to stick to time, I think, yeah, I would love to ask this question to our policymakers. Why is it so uncommon to use these solutions? But I think, just like Juan pointed out, I think it's a kind of cultural change. It's a mindset change that we need to challenge the way we've been challenging things, and just think outside of the box and bring a more kind of holistic perspective to anything we do. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Sharaf?
Yes, I think the regulators see community networks as a direct competitor to them. And I'd like to add one point that will increase the successful implementation of community networks, is that the more sense of ownership the stakeholders feel, this will lead to a sustainable project.
Yes, sustainability, I think, is an excellent point, that it's not just putting up the network, but it's making sure it's sustainable on a technical and financial basis. Thank you. And Walid, thank you for staying with us. If you had a couple final thoughts on the panel and wanted to wrap up a few points.
Yeah, to the point, like why we're not seeing more community networks in the Arab region. I think what's happening is that we need to see more disruptive thinking from the governments and the regulators and the policymakers. And the challenge there is that the technology changed so quickly that the current policymakers are not well equipped or do not have the right knowledge to take the right decision in the space. So I guess one of the things is to have to try to see more millennials represented in technology decision-making positions would probably help move the needle towards the right direction. So that's kind of like for me, the concluding remark is that empower young people in decision-making positions, particularly technology impacting.
Okay, thank you. And I think we're all lucky that you're in this new position at the ITU and able to help with this. I won't comment on whether or not you're a millennial. I won't comment on whether or not you're a millennial, but I think it's important, and good luck with that, with your new position.
Thank you.
That brings us to a close. I don't know if anyone from the organizers would like to say a few final words. If you look in the chat, there's some other sessions coming up that are going to be important. Look out in this, there will be some other reports on this coming out from the Internet Society and others focused on the region. With that, I'll ask if any of the organizers want to have a final word. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending. Thanks to all the panelists. I think we have to give you, unfortunately, a virtual thank you. But thank you for an excellent panel and a lot to think about. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Under the slogan of shaping our digital future, the Arab International Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, the CDF, will bring together representatives and experts from Arab governments, the business sector, civil society, the technical community, academia, and international organizations. DCDF will be held virtually from 13 to 23 December 2021 by ESCO, LAS, ITU, UNCTAD, and UNDESA. Through almost 30 sessions over 8 days, you can participate in policy debate on priority issues in the fields of internet policies and digital development globally and in the Arab region. DCDF aims to align the Arab tracks of the World Summit on the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forum to maximize opportunities for digital cooperation. Register now to join us in this journey from 13 to 23 December. Together, let's shape our digital future.